Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. Also at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, check out the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, The Larry P. Arnn Show, and more, all at podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means the Hillsdale Dialogue is upon us. Once a week, the last radio hour of the week, the last radio hour on the Salem News Channel, is devoted to the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, or one of his colleagues. And Dr. Arnn and I have been moving through World War I at the pace of World War I, but we're getting faster. And we're going to get through Volume 2 in a couple of weeks. Volume 1 is behind us. We're going to do the Dardanelles next week, and we're doing it in 1 hour, we promise. Before we go there, we're going to talk about not planes, trains, and automobiles, but about tanks, smoke, and poison gas. Because one thing I want you to take away is Churchill the innovator. And Dr. Larry Arnn, I think this is underappreciated about him. His friendship with science and scientists and his willingness to try and think way out of the box. He's sort of an Elon Musk kind of guy when it gets down to it, isn't it?
This gives me a chance to make a distinction that we like about at Hillsdale College. First of all, the liberal arts means appreciating high things just to appreciate them. Science means something different than technology. Science comes from a Latin word that means no. Technology comes from Greek words that mean to make, right? And so if you're going to make a thing, you're going to pick up the resources and you're going to change them. Whereas to behold them, to see the world for the joy of high joy of seeing it. Churchill had both inclinations, right? Churchill was he carried a physicist around with him named Frederick Lindemann, later Baron Charwell,
the prof,
and that guy was important. That guy had a lot to do with the career of Winston Churchill, and their conversations are hilarious. Churchill loved to get Lindemann to calculate things, to tell him how things work, not things he needed to know necessarily. The famous one is Churchill at dinner once announced that he had drunk enough brandy to fill up this room. And Lindemann got out a slide rule, looked at the room, asked him how much he drank. And then he walked over to the side and he marked a place on the wall, like a quarter of an inch up. And Churchill said, "So little time, so much to do." Anyway, Churchill loved that. But the tank thing and the Dardanelles thing are of a piece. They arise in Churchill's mind, but each of them from the same motive. And that is, he's trying to save his country, and his country is in a war in which it's killing off the better part of a whole generation of young men. And he thought that that's a disaster, whether we win or lose. And so he was trying to stop that. And that was, this 5-volume book that we're working our way through. It's written to demonstrate the importance of that.
Of every
that,
detail.
I can tell you. Oh, yeah. Well, he wants to tell the story. The details matter because Churchill is responsible for many of these things. He has a very heavy responsibility for the invention of the tank, which was not decisive in the First World War, but showed great promise. But in the Second World War, it changed the first half of the war, and then in the opposite direction, the second half of the war.
Well, let's pause here for a moment, because it might have made a difference in World War I had people listened to Churchill when he brought forth the idea. On page 49 of chapter 4 of volume 2, Churchill writes, "There was a moment when the actual manufacture of the first tanks was definitely ordered, and there was a moment when an effective machine was designed as the direct outcome of the authorization." And what he is saying there is that everything that is invented, or as you mentioned last week, the Kmart that you built that is now a Coats R Us or something like that, there was a time when someone laid out the blueprint and said, go. There's always a moment where somebody says, do this. Your chapel at Hillsdale. There's a moment that someone says, we're going to build a chapel. And what I took away from this chapter is Churchill is telling everyone, there is a moment in time for everything where somebody says, do this, now go. And that we ought to know that more often than we do.
Yeah. That, and, that's where, I've been in a correspondence with one of my great students, Clifford Humphrey, who's eventually going to be a college president somewhere. And he wrote me and asked me my habits, because I work a lot, and I've been doing it for a long time. And he works a lot now, and he's got to do it for a long time. And so I explained to him, and this is your point elaborated, on the ground of Aristotle, habits are not as important as choices. Aristotle tells us that our character, which is something different than habit. Habit is like you cross your right leg over your left or the other way, right? Usually don't think about that very much, right? You just do it. But a choice and a character is a thing you do because of a long and deliberate commitment. And Aristotle says that it's the moment of making choices more than actions that you form your character. Well, this choice, Churchill made two big choices for the same goal, to limit the war and win it at an affordable cost, or relatively affordable. And one of them was the Dardanelles, and one of them was the tank. And one of them worked out eventually, even in the First World War, as you say, it made a difference. They won one battle because of it. But one of them didn't work out. But what's significant for Churchill's character and our understanding of character is why he made the choice. What did he want? What was the motive? If the motive had been in either of them to unseat the prime minister and take his place, which was not any evidence that that was the motive in either case, then that would have been one kind of motive. If it was to save his country and perform his duty at the highest level, that's a fine motive. And in both cases,
his character is also demonstrated in that he is not greedy for praise for this. He, in fact, goes back and credits H.G. Wells. And I don't know much about Wells, except he was wrong about everything other than writing fun books. But he credited the idea to H.G. Wells, which is an admonition to modern political people to read broadly and be open to the other side. At least that's what I draw from it. I don't know if you agree with that.
Churchill loved H.G. Wells. And H.G. Wells was a crazy socialist. And they had a long correspondence. Churchill wrote one of his most significant letters to H.G. Wells. He wrote to him because he'd read his books, right? And Churchill loved to. It's like what we did last week, right? It's always fun to speculate about the future, and you never get caught.
That's right.
I really like that about it.
Ours is on tape, though. Yeah. Unfortunately, ours is on tape.
Yeah, but the other thing is, nobody expects you to be right.
Correct.
Once in a great while, I predicted
that the Supreme Court would overturn Colorado 9-0. And I got a lot of props for that 2 weeks ago when the Colorado Supreme Court got punted 9-0. But that wasn't hard. That was kind of easy.
Yeah. It was, however, the risk involved was it was specific and the result was nigh. In other words, people could remember that one. But they'll forget it soon enough. And,
True.
And so anyway, Churchill loved that kind of thing. And he wrote a lot of really good stuff about that. And himself, predictions about the future. He wrote to H.G. Wells about one of his books. He said, I cannot agree with the premise of the book that a future society can be governed by experts. Expert knowledge is narrow knowledge. And every practical decision involves a wide range of things. And then he said, is there not a form of expertise in weighing the competing opinions and measuring and estimating the cost and reaching a practical conclusion. He says, the simple knowledge of the plain man who only knows what hurts is a better guide than expertise. Now,
that's right.
I'll add, isn't that right? And that's just, if you read Book 6 of Aristotle's Ethics, you'll see the explanation of practical wisdom, which is the choosing virtue, the one the statesmen have to have the most. That's what it says.
More on practical wisdom. Hold it right there, Dr. Arnn. I'll be right back with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Hugh for Hillsdale.com for all of the Hillsdale Dialogues, approaching 900. Hillsdale.edu or Hugh for Hillsdale.com. Come right back. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Hey, it's Scott Bertram, and I've got a challenge for you today. Become a better educated American citizen. And to help you do just that, we at Hillsdale College have our free online courses available for all who wish to learn. Our challenge? Take just one of our courses. There are so many to choose from. You can discover the beauty of the Bible in the Genesis story, study the writings of C.S. Lewis, or explore the true meaning of America in Constitution 101. We have dozens more to choose from, and all these self-paced free courses feature Hillsdale faculty and scholars, many you've heard on this podcast. So visit hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE, and pick one of the more than 30 free Hillsdale courses. I hope you'll accept my challenge. Pick whichever course you like and become a more educated citizen today. Go to hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE. That's hillsdale.edu/course.
Welcome back, America. That music means the Hillsdale Dialogue. Last radio hour of the week is underway. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. I'm talking about Credential Wisdom with Dr. Larry Arnn as we continue our plumbing of the depth of Winston Churchill's World War I memoir.
And, here, Francis Collins, who's a very good man, right? And he was the head of the National Institute of Health. And he called the dogs down on my friends Jay Bhattacharya and Scott Atlas and Martin Kulldorff, fringe scientists, right? They've got to be stopped. But now, what's he saying? Now he's saying we made the mistake of looking too narrowly, right? Our only job was preventing death from disease, and we only looked at that. And, of course, there's an excellent argument that they caused more deaths than they saved with what they did.
Well, I hope he's repentant.
So
Dr. Fauci is not repentant. I do not know that. I don't know. I'm not saying he is or isn't. I don't know if Dr. Collins is repentant.
Francis Collins, I believe he did very wrong things there. I maintain the belief. I know him a little. He's been on the campus once. He's a Christian who, thinks, as I think, that understanding genetics doesn't challenge the premises of Christianity.
Agree. He's a great apologist.
So I think that, and he's not simply contrite, but he did admit an error, which is more than I know Fauci to have done. And
I don't. The opposite. Dr. Fauci's been the opposite. Nothing was wrong. Everything was great. Couldn't be helped.
Yeah. Couldn't we? It's, you get, and see, in his world, by the way, there's something, in my opinion, that's corrupted college professors. Because a college professor is a very noble kind of thing. They're always really smart. They're always good at learning. They always excel in school. As a rule, they're really good on the standardized test. And that means they can go to any professional medical school they want to. Many of them do. Good for them. But the ones who go into college professing, they're never going to get rich. And they're more doing it for the love of it. And that's a great thing, right? Well, Fauci is a ruler, right? He has a model of the world. If the front page headline is a disease, then I'm in charge. I get to do everything. I'm not a thinker anymore. Now I'm a doer, and I'm using power. And I think that's what's come over the college world, too. I think that these crazy college professors are not, the crazy ones, are not really scholars. I think they have a template, to impose on the world, and they take great pleasure in exercising that kind of influence, which is different. That goes back to the distinction I made before, which there's a way to mark out a statesman. If you read the classics, they will tell you that the ultimate aim of a regime is to do justice to everybody, but there's a special class, and they're members of that class, these philosophers. They just want to think. They want to look up to the heavens and try to understand. And tyrants don't like that, because now something's above the tyrant to you, right? And if you teach students, something will be above the tyrant to the students. And so it's in Aristotle, it's in Brave New World, it's in Darkness at Noon, it's in all those great totalitarian novels. They resent the thinkers. Churchill respected them.
Oh, indeed. He respected them, and I respect Dr. Arnn. Don't go anywhere. You've got to hear the end of this story. This is really quite an amazing chapter. Welcome back, America. On this Friday, I'm Hugh Hewitt. All Things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu. You know from the music that we are in the Hillsdale Dialogue, usually, and it is the case this week. Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, is my guest. All Things Hillsdale, collected at hillsdale.edu, including the application that your kids ought to be filling out for 2025, and all of the prior dialogues at hughforhillsdale.com.
I want to go there for a moment, because there's something that reminded me of something you said a couple of weeks ago. So let's go there. 2 weeks ago, you told me, or maybe it was 2 months ago, you had returned from India. You were excited about India, and your enthusiasm caught on the campus. And some young men came to you and spoke with energy and conviction, force and vision. And you said to them, no. And here I find Churchill noting on 2 occasions Admiral Bacon, quote, he spoke with energy and conviction about the tank. Major Hetherington, who, quote, spoke with force and vision on the whole subject. They pushed Churchill, who in turn pushes everyone else. So the merits of speaking, Dr. Arnn, with energy, conviction, force, and vision, does it advance arguments and ought to advance arguments? And if so, why are your kids still in Hillsdale, not in India?
Because, well, first of all, those kids get something from that. I remember them, and I will be of service to them more than I would have, because now I'll know how to do it, because they can do things, right? And the fact that the point was stupid does not does not eliminate the good that they did. So I praise those boys.
All right, let's move on to gas, poison gas. The quote, page 52, to these conceptions, modern chemistry offered terrible possibilities. I want to read to you something that Churchill said when he saw a painting by John Singer Sargent called Gassed. We're going to show it here. Churchill said he witnessed this, that it was a work of great art, and that, I got to find the exact quote, and I've lost it here, that maybe even genius, I can't quite remember what it was, but he wanted it conveyed. Churchill wanted it conveyed how awful this was, and that the public imagination needed to understand it. And I think he saw it coming.
Oh, yeah. He, there are as many charges against Churchill as there can be, but until somebody comes up with a new one, I guess. But one of them is that he did call for the use of poison gas once. And there's decisive reason to think that he meant mustard gas. And that was an annoyance. You know, they called it that because it was kind of like getting mustard up your nose. It didn't blind you. I guess it could if it got enough of it directly in you. But that kind of gas Churchill favored at various times. But the chemical gas, the kind that would kill or maim, for sure, he favored the use of that only in retaliation. And they did, the Germans were, he writes, there's a line in this book that we're reading in book 1. Germany kept in the van, and that means the vanguard, the front of terror. The Allies followed behind. And that, that's a cycle how do you break that cycle in war, right? Because
it's worrisome. We did break it. I don't know if you've watched the Masters of the Air new series on Apple TV by Spielberg and Hanks. But we invented the bomb sight, and the Brits invented radar. And but for the bomb sight and the radar, we would not have won that war. Our technical genius had to exceed. And now there is a danger that we've bureaucratized innovation to such an extent that we cannot keep up with the Chinese. Now, some of my friends tell me that's not true in the underwater domain. I'm glad to hear it. And that we've got stuff I can't even dream of, and the Chinese don't even know that we have. And I hope that's true. Do you think it's true?
That's in the category of things that I pray for. It's in the category that America has not died. Because first of all, it's a typical thing. China is a much more regimented society than we are. I myself think it prospers in part because it's not fully regimented. And I think that they've gotten very artful at managing the society in a way that keeps the unrest down and offers people a path up. But you better not disagree with us. I see a future attempted like that for us, too. In other words, they might be able to sustain themselves for a long time because they don't cut off everything in human nature, just the best and highest things.
Oh.
And they let a lot of it flourish. And that, in other words, a milder tyranny is more appealing than a harsh one.
Well, I hope they're harsh in technology because I don't want them to get ahead. I want to return to a moment for another key from this chapter about Churchill seeing the tank, but doing more than seeing it. He authorized it. And he writes, quote, "I thus took personal responsibility for the expenditure of the public money involved, about 70,000 pounds. I did not invite the Board of Admiralty to share this responsibility with me. I did not inform the War Office." Now, today in the United States, that would get you put in jail. And we got a picture there of one of the early tanks that just did not impress a whole bunch of another one there. And there's a third one. The Germans got into it, too. I'm not sure how many people stand up and take responsibility for things when they've done it on their own while it's being done, Dr. Arnn. Because the tank still hadn't proved itself when this came out.
That's right. And he still believed in it. And one of the functions of this book is to accept and assign responsibility. Because the big thing was he promoted the Dardanelles, which he very much did. And it was his fault that it became so awful. And we're going to talk about him, but it was his friend, Ian Hamilton, who lost all of those troops in the land battles on the Gallipoli Peninsula. And so he accepts what he believes is right in responsibility, but he also tells the story richly to show that it certainly was not his in the main. Well, he believed in it, right? Now, the tank, he believed in it very much, believed in it at the time he wrote this. Later, it would just, it was the thing. And, we know the names of the generals who adopted it and believed in it the most. And their names are George Patton and Erwin Rommel and Guderian of the Germans and
Charles de Gaulle.
Charles de Gaulle. Yeah, that's in other words,
that's a good
those
list.
guys had an eye to see. Here's the thing about the tank. I read a riveting article in Tablet magazine by Edward Luttwak, Luttwak.
Great strategist.
Who's been, I think I might have met him one time in my life, but I've been reading him for 40 years, and he's really brilliant. And it's about how the Israelis are fighting in Gaza. And at the time he wrote the article, it's probably 2 weeks old now. He said that to date they had lost 348, I think was the number, soldiers in Gaza. And the reason they had lost so few was that they were fighting brilliantly. And a key to the way they fight is they use almost entirely their own equipment, not bought from us. And apparently their personnel carriers are better than ours because they're safe. It's in their case, it's not an offensive weapon. It's to protect the soldiers. And then the way they've designed them is embedded in the armor everywhere are cameras, and those cameras display the outside world richly in huge screens that make up the interior walls of this fighting vehicle. So they can see all around them. And then they've got little cheap drones, most of them made by them, some of them the size of insects. And they're surveying the street. And they can see if there's any soldiers. They can't see behind windows very good. And, of course, in a lot of places there are a lot of windows reaching up high. Well, they just don't get out of the personnel carrier in places like that unprotected.
And that's a smart choice. Don't get out of the personnel carrier. All Things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Stand by, Dr. Arnn. We'll come back and finish this conversation.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway, Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now. Or text the word Imprimis to 71844 and we'll send you a link to sign up for your free lifetime subscription. That's IMPRIMIS to 71844.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Pack it up, getting ready to go from California. Fly over Michigan, get back to the Beltway. But I'm going to go back to Hillsdale and see Dr. Arnn in person, broadcast from the Hillsdale studios in April. Really looking forward to that. But let's get back to the business at hand.
I've been talking about Israel a lot with Dr. Arnn, our former Israeli ambassador to the United States, and a brilliant young man who I can only compare to a young crowdhammer by the name of Haviv Redig-Gur. 40 years old, but he's just brilliant. And the Israelis have been so efficient in avoiding civilian casualties, and we are so harsh on them for doing the best job possible, because and you know this as well as anyone because you've been studying war and Churchill your entire life, there's a level beyond which you cannot minimize casualties when the enemy intends you to kill civilians. That's a pre-modern decision to sacrifice civilians that we overcame in the Civil War. We didn't fight against civilians in the Civil War, did we? We didn't try and kill the other side's civilians.
Well, no, we didn't. Sherman was accused of that by General Hood because he made the citizens of Atlanta leave the city. And there were doubtless some casualties because of that, but we didn't shoot civilians. And the correspondence, people should look that up. The correspondence between General Hood and General Sherman is riveting.
I'm unaware of that.
Hood,
huh?
Oh well, Hood writes to him, and it's if you're proud of the prowess of your country, it will make you that. From Sherman's point of view, Hood writes, "This is inhumane. This is not right," and Sherman writes back and says, "We're going to occupy this city, and we're at war, and they have started and sustained the war, and they will now feel the cost of it, and that is probably good, because they are trying to take everything we have." And it's very good. And see, Hood, he's in Atlanta, and when he leaves Atlanta, and what the Confederacy is doing, they were good. They were very capable warriors and generals, as they were harassing his supply lines down to Atlanta from the north. And then he wants to go to Charleston. He wants to go marching across the South. And so he made this incredible decision to give up his supply lines. he's just going to take off and go live off the land. And he marched across the whole Confederacy like that. General Beauregard, who was again commanding in Charleston at the end of the war, as he had at the beginning to command the firing on Fort Sumter, he said that after this march was over and Sherman had approached Charleston from the south, he said, maybe in the annals of Julius Caesar and Gaul you can find a match to this, but you would certainly have to look back that far.
Wow.
And so, and Hood, one of the things about it that was devastating to the Confederacy was that the Confederate Army had armies shadowing Sherman, but they didn't bring him to battle because they were going to get beat, and they knew it. And so that was, it was, that's right. They didn't, neither north to south.
Innovation and risk. It's all about, that's why these books are so amazing, because they bring up conversations about innovation, risk, long-range planning, development, mistakes, the willingness to accept things. It's really quite an education. I hope you teach a seminar on this. We'll be back next week, America, with the Dardanelles. We are finally there, and Dr. Arnn will get to talk for an uninterrupted, I won't promise uninterrupted. I never can keep that promise, but a lot by his own on what happened and why. Don't miss next week on the Dardanelles. The Hillsdale Dialogues. Follow everything at hillsdale.edu. All of our prior dialogues are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. Easier for you to say than me. hughforhillsdale.com.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.